What's up, everybody? Got a great episode today with Tom Chorske. We had him on a few episodes ago. If you haven't seen that, check it out. Guys won the Stanley Cup. He is a pretty well-known name in the game, especially if you're from Minnesota. And we're really tackling the issue of mental fitness, mental health in hockey today from multiple fronts. Everything from depression to just kind of how to manage players on a team, as a parent, as a coach, as someone else's parent, like not the parent of another kid. It's a bit of a long conversation, so you might want to consume this one in two parts. But it's really, really good. Just so many nuggets of wisdom in this one from really the entire crew here today. So check that out. Also, if you're watching this, it's still not quite the holiday yet. So you got some time. Head over to ourkidsplayhockey.com. Check out our holiday deals. Again, we aggregated together a bunch of deals for teams, for individuals. If you're looking for a late stocking stuffer, with some pretty cool discounts for you, from our team. So if you want to support us, follow us, subscribe to us, share us with friends. That's number one. If you also want to support us a little bit different, check out ourkidsplayhockey.com and see those deals. And it's a great way to support the show. With that said, you are a fantastic audience. We cannot thank you enough. We grow every week. I'm so thankful for you. I really genuinely mean that. And I really hope you enjoy this episode with Tom Chorske and the crew on Our Kids Play Hockey. Here we go. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friends Mike Benelli and Christy Casciano-Burns. And we have Tom Chorske with us back again today because we've got a very important topic today. We're going to be talking about mental health and mental fitness with kind of the older age group, that 12-year-old up section of the audience that we have today. Now, with that said, if you are under 12, if your kids are under 12, this is still going to be a really powerful episode for you because your kids will be over 12 before you know it. And this is going to be a lot of great stuff to help you out. I'm sure some of it will apply to the younger age groups as well. But Tom, I'm going to throw it to you again. We're talking about mental fitness. One of the things you said prior to the episode that really hit me is you've seen this as a player and now you're experiencing it as a parent. And I think that gives a really well-rounded view on this. But talk for a few minutes about why we're doing this episode, right? And why this is an important topic we need to cover.
Well, I think first and foremost, this is a topic that has been covered more and more and better and better. And I think we're in a much better place than we were as a sport and maybe hopefully even as a society, even 2, 3, 4 years ago. Sadly, I think we still see athletes that choose to take their own life, and usually it's connected back to somewhat related to their sport, or at least they're athletes, and oftentimes you don't know exactly what was going on, right? Because the story is often told by parents that they had no idea. But the reason that we need to keep talking about it, and like I said, teams and organizations and leagues have been doing a much better job, but it's just something that's it's really hard for young people and athletes, and they get a lot on their plate, and they're super passionate about their sport, whether it's hockey or gymnastics or cheer or whatever. And we all get really passionate about these activities that we're in, and then sometimes run into either a coach who seems to be making it harder through the way they communicate or the way they act and things like that, or teammates, and just so there's a lot of elements to it, and I think that's why it's such a complex issue. But it's also like anything. I think the more you talk about it and make it a little more normal, especially for young people, because they're the ones the hardest. Teenagers don't like to talk about their insecurities and their vulnerabilities or their issues anyway. So
yeah, I mean, I've been finding, and obviously social media plays such a huge role in all this, right? Because I can't even imagine as a player growing up, like I get anxiety now as a parent, seeing other parents and what they're doing and think, oh man, I can't believe I'm not doing that with my kids, or wow, that's think like an interesting thing they're doing, or wow, am I missing out on all those extra sessions or that tournament the kids went to, or like I think I'm pretty based in reality, and I get anxiety from it. Like I can't even imagine what a 14, 15-year-old boy or girl feels, because we're not, and I don't know if we do a great job equipping them either to deal with that, right? I mean, I think growing up, like your parents would give you the the speech and or just talk to you about being confident and there was never that pressure of keeping up with everyone. I didn't think. But now it's like a like I feel so I think I feel so lucky for the people that don't have any social media impact at all. Like people don't even know what's going on. Like, cause it's just they're more, it's just a little bit more, it's not naive, but at least they're not jaded in any way, right? You're just like, I don't know, this seems abnormal to think this way about your kid. And then now you think about a 15-year-old, it seems abnormal to think like, well, what do you care about what other people think? Well, I care because 3,000 people didn't like my post or didn't not like it, or whatever the way they read those are.
Right. And you're so right, Mike, because the bullying has really changed. It used to be in the schoolyard, right? Or in the hallway or in the cafeteria. Now it follows the kids home. It's on their phones, it's on their social media accounts.
Well, and the bullying's different. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
Tom's saying too with the mental
Yeah.
health, right? At least if somebody was bullying you, you punch them in the nose. I mean, just you got it over with. Said,
Well,
okay,
you
get the
knew
Yeah.
who it was.
And that was
get the
it,
bag of
right?
peas- Get the bag
Yeah.
of peas out of the freezer and throw the steak on your eye, and you
Yeah.
got it over with. But now it's like it's a constant flow of
Constant.
bullying. It's not,
Constant.
and I don't even think it's like honestly, I don't even think some kids even think it's bullying. I just
Yeah.
think they think it's normal.
It's
Like,
not.
of course you're gonna
I know.
of course you're gonna like belittle somebody because that's just normal.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, look,
I don't know.
Mike, I'll say this too. Like everyone's brave when they're behind a computer
Yeah,
screen.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
not limited to kids, right? Go to any NHL fan group online, and they'll tell you how the team should be playing, and they know because they've watched the game for 25 years. But yeah, look, I think we're making a great point here that the tides have changed here. Now, going back to mental fitness and mental health, Tom, as you put it, I think I call it we're in the Band-Aid phase where people are kind of aware of it. It is a serious issue. People know, oh, we got to pay attention to this, but we're in the let's put a Band-Aid on it and we'll fix it. And the truth is that it's not so much an open gaping wound as much as it is you have to protect your mind like you protect your body. That's kind of my mission in terms of this space is to help people realize and then to assist them of you must take care of your mind like you're going to the gym to take care of your body. If you stop working out, you will get out of shape. If you are not constantly working on your mind, you will get out of shape. And I think and Tom, I'm gonna throw this back to you. We talked about the overwhelmingness of high school and college. I think one of the misinterpreted or misunderstood parts of mental fitness is that it's not something you get or you achieve. There are times you're going to have it, and there's times you're not going to have it. And again, this is true for everyone. This is not limited to hockey players. This is a human thing. So I just think it's important we realize that it's not about just getting your kids, because that's what we're talking about, to a good mental state. It's teaching them the tools of how to consistently maintain a good mental state. Or if you're out of a good mental state, here's ways to get yourself back into the kind of that area, right? We're not doing enough of that. And that's where I think the space needs to go. And again, in the overwhelming world of high school and collegiate hockey, I think this is becoming more of a topic, but we're not where we need to be
Yeah.
yet.
And here's the thing, we talk about high school and college, but I think those are concepts you have to now introduce to your kids at a younger
Totally
age.
agree, Christy.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, it's a workout. I think it's a workout. Like,
Right.
like Tom, I'm sure like when I mean, imagine you now being a player in the NHL and having all this access. Now, I'm sure there's some of the players that now have grown up with it. Maybe it's easier for them. Like, and my understanding is there's so much work that the NHL does, or any professional sports franchises do for their players, right, to prepare them for this type of thing. And obviously they trip up and there's a lot of mistakes, but there's definitely like, so you think about what the NHL clubs do for their players. Like maybe that's something we need to do for our youth kids. Like maybe that's got to be something built into the way we develop our organizations if we're actually developing the whole person and their mental health. One of the pieces of their mental health is not only can't we have coaches berating them live, but they also have to know that what happens behind the scenes, and how do we as coaches, look for that and understand it, because we see them a lot, right? We get to see the kids in situations that maybe parents don't get to see them in
Right.
locker rooms or in social settings around their teammates. So maybe, maybe we have to be trained better to look for those signs.
I think that's an important point to raise, but because you're right, you see the kids in different settings than we as parents see them. We might not pick up on some of the signs that you can pick up on, whether they're withdrawn, they're not participating as much as they used to, their behavior has changed, and they might be able to pretend with parents that everything is fine because we don't see them in those settings, but you guys do. I think
Yeah,
that's good.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. Kids will always present to their parents, when they're, especially if they're older, and they'll present to their parents that everything's fine.
Everything's fine. Yeah.
And they don't mention, like we said, there's been a lot of things here. My brain's been sort of spinning around here, but Mike, when you mentioned, like, I can't imagine these days, even you get anxiety, but what I see there is that you have awareness of it. You're aware that you are feeling a little bit of not stress or anxiety, but it's I don't know, you're aware that you're having thoughts and you're comparing or whatever, you're wondering.
Yeah, and sometimes, well, and
shouldn't
then
have
honestly, sometimes it's jealousy. Sometimes like,
Sure.
oh man, I wish I could have done that. And
Yeah.
and it's like when your neighbor, has their nice yard, and you're like, damn it, I got to stop going to hockey practice. Like, what the heck's going on here?
I have never
think
once thought that, Mike. Just so you know.
Right, but
Right.
now you're seeing it around the world, right? It's not just your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Like you're not just in that little neighborhood of saying, oh wow, I really like that guy got a really nice car. I wonder how he did that. But now it's like you see everybody. Like there's nobody that's not your neighbor.
But you're aware of it. You're aware that you're having these sort of thoughts. I think the younger you go, they'll have feelings and emotions, but they're not aware of maybe why it's happening, because they're clicking through their social media and they're spinning through it and they're seeing things, and they don't have the conscious, thought like, oh, I'm starting to feel jealous or envious because of what I'm doing. And we can, as adults, we can process that, I think. Another comment about having maybe some counseling or professional help at lower levels, I will say, I think more and more pro teams are making it available to the players. They'll have a sports performance coach or a mental performance coach, I think is maybe a term, instead of just a sports psychologist, which implies that someone needs a psychologist to get their their mind right, which isn't usually always the case. I think that's another thing, is normalizing that you do go through slumps, and that's hard as a hockey player, or you made a bunch of mistakes and now you're getting scratched from the lineup, and that puts a lot of anxiety, and which can lead to depression. And there's a whole host of things too, right, that the mental health umbrella covers. We usually think of it as depression, right, or maybe stress and anxiety, but there can be other types of I think mental health elements. So I do like the idea, though, of introducing it a little bit younger and having some people talk to players. We have a Division III coach in Minnesota. Coach Mark Wick is his name. He got to a point where he contemplated suicide. He was very close. He had basically an emotional breakdown. Fortunately, his wife was a nurse, and for about the last probably 3 years, he finally just said, "Hey, I have to step back from hockey and I have to get healthy." And then ever since that, he went through some counseling, and he kind of got back to a place where he decided that, he was no longer, suicidal, and had a lot to live for, which he did. He was a wonderful guy. And since then, he's been going around and talking to teams around the Midwest, and maybe he's even gotten on some planes. And he wasn't really an expert, except that he went through it. And he says, I will show up anywhere and talk to any team, because it, like all of us, it breaks his heart if they find out. He has done some research, he'll talk to the players and say, statistically, out of you 20 players, there's 4 or 5 of you, or whatever that, the number is, that will experience, a mental health crisis. And so I know it's being talked about more and more, and we've got some organizations that were spurred on or brought on by, unfortunately, by hockey players that did take their life at, in their teens, or maybe 20 years old is another player that I'm aware of. So it's something that's being addressed, but there's a whole host of things that it's not an easy, it's a complex, situation.
Yeah, Tom, I'm going to jump into with a few kind of actionable items, maybe for our audience a little bit here. So
Great.
A few things about depression and suicide. One is, for every parent out there and every teammate, every person, suicide awareness is something that should be on your radar. Almost everyone, that commits suicide or attempts suicide is showing signs that they are going to do it. These are facts that I'm giving. I'm not just making these up off the top of my head, but most give signs, most want help and are asking for help. And the most direct way to help someone, if you think they are considering suicide, is to directly ask them if they are considering suicide. Now, this is a very hard thing to do. All right. For a lot of people, I've actually gone through training for this, and it's hard in a scenario where you're just acting it out, much less it being real. But if you're a parent or a teammate that thinks someone is in that place, the best thing you can do is ask them, and then understand that it's not your responsibility at that point to, quote unquote, fix them. It is your responsibility maybe to lead them to someone that can help. All right. So that is kind of very quickly Suicide Awareness 101. If anybody listening wants more on this, feel free to email us. I can send you to a lot of different resources. Now let's talk about depression that can lead to that. We find this, and I find this with all the work I've done with the military. Depression is prevalent when three things are missing: identity, purpose, and community. When you lose one of those three things, it can be hard. If you lose all three, you are going to be in a tough place, because as humans, we're not meant to operate without those things. And again, identity, who am I? What is it that makes me who I am? Purpose is, this is why I'm driven, and community is, these are the people I'm driven with. We all need that in some form. Tom, you brought up community before, and having conversations and communication. I always say the key to alleviating burnout or alleviating depression or any kind of anxiety is to talk with other people that are experiencing it, to realize, hey, I'm not alone, and there's other people going through it. Too often we're looking for answers or the answer, and we all experience anxiety and depression and everything so differently that it's so hard to pinpoint, here's the answer. But communication, that is a big key to alleviating some of that stress and at least walking forward. Now, again, identity, purpose, and community. One of the problems I see in youth hockey, and this is where I want to dive into, is we have a lot of players identify as, I am a hockey player, and if I'm not a hockey player, what am I? And that is a very dangerous identity, because you will not get to play the game forever. It doesn't matter who you are. Now, I'm not saying hockey isn't part of your life, and it's not a major purpose, and it's not a part of who you are. But I've always said this as I get older. One of the biggest days of my life when I realized, hey, I don't have to play hockey. I choose to play hockey. And then I said, well, who am I? And at the time it was, I want to be a good boyfriend to my future wife. As I've gotten older, I want to be a good dad. Like, these are the things that I identify. I want to be a good boss and manager, a good person. That's how I identify. It's not a holier than thou thing in any way. That's me, right? So I think that when you identify with something, especially a game that 98% of the game is out of your control, it's a dangerous place to be. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think just talking about those three elements would be helpful for a young person,
right?
A young player, because now you're breaking it down for them: identity, purpose, and community.
Right.
And I've lived that. And I didn't have these three things to ponder when I was playing, and it's been a long time since I played, but I can tell you that when I was playing, when I was struggling mentally and was in sort of some dark places, that say I'm in a slump and I'm getting scratched from the lineup, or I get traded from a team because I wasn't performing and some other team's willing to give me a chance. That's where, that's all of a sudden, I'm in a new situation. So I don't have my community, maybe, although my community would be my family.
Right. But
maybe you kind of in your head, you think, but they don't really understand what I'm going through. Purpose. I remember feeling at times like, am I not enjoying hockey because I'm not good anymore, or am I not good anymore because I'm not really passionate about it and enjoying it? And so wrestling with that. So I was literally struggling with my purpose too, right? Like, and my identity. When you retire, I guess it's we talked about before we got on, is just how contextually everyone's situation is a little bit different, right? And like, for me to talk about it would be different than a player that played through high school and then had to quit, I suppose. But maybe it's all relative. But when you are so passionate about a sport, and you can be when you're 12 or 15 or 18 or 30, right? Like me. And you get done, it's so ingrained in you, and it was so good to you, and it was the best times of your life, and it served you so well. It really is part of your identity. And I know people say it's not who you are and what you do. And I'm just going to say that's easier said than done.
Sure. Yeah.
It's great in theory, but you can tell that to a pro athlete probably 10 times. But then when they walk out the door and they're, in the quiet moments of their life, they're wondering, like, how do I break free from that identity?
Right.
Because it is all I know. But I've seen it, I know I have two kids playing college hockey, right? Clearly, to get to college hockey, they were super passionate about the sport. And I can tell you from watching them grow up and tons of success, tons of social relationships. They had the good camaraderie with their teammates in their locker rooms, and they were part of, high school championships, and the fact that they got to college means that they kept going and they kept having success. And so they are very passionate about their sport, and then they've got school, and they have to focus on that, and that's very important. And so it's easier said than done to break that identity. But I do want to get back and compliment you and reiterate, just putting that out there, that 3 things are present or lacking when it comes to mental health, I think is really good help for whoever's watching this. They can write down these 3 things, and then now they've got some concepts to think about, either, for their kids or their young players.
Yeah, I guess that's my point from an organizational leadership standpoint then, right, Tom? Because what Lee's saying, if identity, purpose, and community, are we doing this in sport, not just hockey, because I've been around it, all of it, but aren't we putting kids into having to have an identity, a purpose, and community when they're 8 years old, when they're 9 years old? Like, most people, like, when all that kind of stuff, you can handle, like, when you can handle better when you're a teenager and an adult and a young adult and an older adult. But for a 9 and 10-year-old, that their identity, their purpose, and their community is their hockey life.
Yeah.
Or their tennis life, and the few people that make it through, I think we all look at them and say, well, look at that person, they did okay. Yeah, but there's 3,000 kids that didn't. And us as parents, and I guess that's where, going back to that original conversation, like, that's why coaches are so important sometimes, and leadership people in these sports are so important. And we're putting our kids in their hands, because, like, as a parent, you're blind. Like, you think your kids is that person that's going to make it to the NHL. Like, I've talked to, thousands of families. Oh, no, I want my kid to have fun. It has to be fun. I just want to be in a great environment. But then they do the exact opposite of what they're looking for in this. They're looking to, they're identifying. They go back to the office. They identify as a AAA hockey parent. They identify their purpose is to, the badge of honor that, I did 4 days this week of 5:30 a.m. practices with my 9-year-old. Okay, well, that's okay. I mean,
we should give out actual badges for that, Mike. Because
if that's your passion,
wear them,
but if your whole passion at 8 and 9 years old, and then that's taken away at 12 and 13. I mean, imagine if the highlight of your hockey life was 9. Like, at 9 years old, you won this and that, and went to this tournament, and did all this and went to those camps. If that was your highlight, that's where I feel bad, and only because I see it. Again, if I was in a fishbowl and I was only around my team and my age group, but when you're somebody like, what you're doing, and Lee, and obviously Chrissy's been there, through all of this, with her kids, and seeing all the kids that made it mentally through this quagmire, I think a lot of it has to do with how we set up programming. I think a lot of it has to do with the way the people that are leading the sport put these kids in a situation where we're demanding, identity, purpose, and being a part of my community way, way too early. And we're not leaving any room for them to find that on their own.
And I think that's where the parents come in. I mean, you've got to take control there, mom and dad. Don't let that happen to your kid.
There's a lot of pressure to do that, though. There's a lot. It's so hard for a parent to say, because they don't want to be the parent that says, I just want to have fun. And all the other parents are like, what are you, crazy? You can't have fun. This is hard work. Like, if you want to make it, you need to do this.
Yeah, I've seen that pressure, but hopefully it's, yeah.
Well, Mike, I think Mike made a couple other good points there, and we have to have categories, right? So there is going to be AAA and AA, and in Minnesota, you are Pee Wee AA, that's your top level, Bantam AA, and then there's AAA in the summer. And so I think, to a point to parents, if your kid is it seems like the lower you are, the less the parent is going to be, I guess, identifying with their hockey player or athlete, if they're just sort of average or a little above average. But if you get to that top level, then, as you mentioned, a lot of people take a lot of social status from that. And we're proud of our kids. And I suppose the better they do, the more proud we are of them. But I think it would go a long way for parents to try to, not squash the kids' confidence, but talk less about, don't always be talking about them as a AA player, as a AAA player. Oh, Mike made AAA this year, and because then the kid hears that and that starts to be his identity, right? So parents can start sending the right identity messages of, oh, you're a good brother, you're a good son, you're a good cousin, you're a good grandkid, or daughter, and just if they had some awareness of the identity you're building, a good student. There's other things about their identity that you want to enforce, for sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because let's go into a rink lobby any day, the parents are trading their war stories. Oh, we drove 7 hours in a blizzard. Oh, we did, right? They're not trading stories about, oh, my kid got 4.0 on his latest essay.
Yeah, but see, it's funny, Christy. My father would do the same thing. Like we drove. I've driven the hockey tournaments with my father as a kid, and I'm like out the window scraping the front, like, hanging out of a car window on a highway, scraping the snow for him, right? Because he's like, we can't see. You got to knock off the
good old days.
And so, and I look back and I go, that was nuts. But it was part of the great journey. Like, listen, I loved it. My father loved it. I loved that time. What I'm saying is, there's nothing wrong with that either. I love.
Well, hold on. Let me dive in here.
Well, maybe hanging out of the car.
You guys are making a point that I don't think you realize you're making, right, Mike? So again, there's the war story in what you just said, Mike. But go deeper, right? And I don't want to make it too emotional, but really, what did you love about that? It wasn't scraping the ice. You were with your dad together. In a moment, that was your identity of the moment of, I'm with my dad in a car and we're doing something together.
Right. And this is why we keep going back to Tom's community where he is, because that community, although it's changing a little bit, right? There's a lot of roadblocks right now, but that like, I never looked at my hockey community as like above somebody else's. It was mine. Like, these are just my friends. These are the people I want to hang out with. Not like, oh, I can't wait to get through this community so I can
wasn't
get to that
status
community.
for you. That wasn't a
it wasn't,
status.
and it wasn't like, oh, I'm driving to the game because I have to show that, I got on, we're the number 10th ranked team in the state or the county or in the town. So, it was the whole point of it's okay to be crazy. It's okay to be like saying, why would you would you really drive in a snowstorm to go to a hockey game? Well,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, again, though, let's.
Got my badge.
But it's where the mental. It's where it's like the anxiety part. Like, you have to do it because of a coach is going to say, "Listen, if you don't get your butt here, you're not playing." And
I got to say this though, right? And look, I got to bring ego into the conversation. I always tell people, ego is not always what people think it is. It's not just some, I got a big ego. Like, ego can be a lot of different things. Parents, your kids are watching you. So to Tom's point, to everybody's point, if you get to the lobby, Christy, right, And it's like, man, we drove 7 hours in a blizzard and I did all this. Well, how is your kid interpreting that? And I'll tell you what, here's a really unbelievably, and I don't care if this gets groans, a really quick thing you can add into that totally changes the conversation. We drove 7 hours in a blizzard. It was horrible. Mike was out the window scraping the car. But you know what? I was really thankful to have that extra time with my kid. You've completely changed the conversation for your kid if they're listening to, wow, dad or mom was just happy to be with me. Yeah. And again, they're not going to say that to you. They're not going to turn like, oh, shucks, dad, I love it that you wanted to be with me. They're not going to say that to you. But that's what they
hear it.
Right. Because I'll tell you, and again, I was very, very blessed in this regard. I always felt safe at home. Good game, bad game, anything in between. I got to play at a high level. I never feared going home to my parents and the fear of being judged by them as a hockey player, because I never thought that that's all I was to them. And parents, I don't think any parent, to be fair, means to do that to their kid.
Right.
But if you're not, Tom, to your point, conscious of how you're identifying, right, odds are they're picking up on that. Well, my dad is so proud of me for being a AAA hockey player, and if I don't succeed at that, you guys listening, carry that conversation on your head. I'm going to say this again. I don't think any parent, or I should say most parents, have no intention of doing that. But you got to be conscious. You got to wake up to identity, purpose, community. Tom, you said it earlier, you got to be conscious to what am I feeling right now? When I work with the 8-year-olds, a lot of my work is tell me what you're feeling, identify the feeling. So you know what that is. That's sadness. That's regret. That's anger. I want you to know what these are so you can learn to control them. And I don't want you to forget how to feel. That's another thing. You know, we'd say, don't cry, don't do this, don't be angry. That is bad advice. Be angry, identify that you're angry, and then learn how to control your anger. You're going to feel. When you bury your feelings, it's like bottling up gas. It's going to explode at some point.
Yes.
Right. So Tom, go ahead.
Yeah.
I can see him.
Yeah, no, I think, I think you're absolutely right. You touch on that. Sometimes we're trying to squish down these emotions, you know, I just let it go. And I've tried saying that to my kids at times, let it go. Don't dwell on it. But you're right. I think it's important to feel those emotions and that those are real human experiences, and it's okay. It's normal. It's not abnormal, and there's nothing wrong with your brain when you are frustrated or depressed or anxious or stressed out. That's normal. You know, another thing, community, the hockey community is so great. You know, I was thinking about the when you guys are talking about the lobby and things like that. And, you know, there are times when you don't play well or you don't play a lot, you know, certain teams, if the coach does have discretion to sit a player or sit a line, you know, you're on the fourth line and you don't play a lot, but there are some wonderful parents in that hockey community. When you come out from the game, you know, I can remember parents coming over, you know, so the non-parent parent that came over to a kid and said, hey, hang in there, keep up the good work. And that's part of that community that can be helpful. So the reason I say it is just as if there's some parents listening and watching, if you're aware that you're not, you know, someone on your son or daughter's team is kind of getting the short end of the stick, or the coach is yelling at them because you're aware of it, or they're just not playing very much, or they made a big mistake. I think it means a lot for a non-parent to walk over to a player and pat him on the back and say, hey, you know, go get him next time, or keep going, or whatever. Because as a parent telling a kid, sometimes the kid's just going to think, well, of course my mom or dad's going to say that to me. Of course they think it's fine. Of course, blah, blah, blah. But it means a lot more. And it probably could be a meaningful comment made by a non-parent parent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Tom,
it makes total sense.
Yeah, isn't that kind of like that community, right? Like I know a group of parents that I can be around when their kids come out, and dad would be like, okay, we got to talk about this, like that. And I'm confident in my community that I can step in and be like, hey, let him go. Let him just get, you know, hey, he doesn't want to hear from you. And then he make a joke and like, oh, you can talk to him tomorrow morning and get on Live Barn and, you know, break down the film. And just like you can help as a parent to another parent diffuse them a little bit too, right? Because you can't catch yourself sometimes. Like if you have a really good friend, or if you really are from a strong community, And it's not about, like to your point, Tom, I think that's such a great aspect, because sometimes, like, good or bad, sometimes the kids and the parents aren't getting that from the coach. Like they're in like they're in like limbo. Like they don't know why the kid didn't play, or not every coach has the opportunity to go down the bench and say, hey, I know you didn't get a lot of ice time today, but I just want to know I really appreciate those 2 shifts you put in there, and this is what you did for us. Or, hey, wow, you're getting to a point where we're going to start depending on you more. Or like, it's hard for coaches to find those kids. It's easy to find the top 6, right? And always be talking to them. But it's hard to find the kid that has a good or bad shift. They sit, maybe they didn't get in the lineup. Maybe the coach forgot him on the bench, whatever. And then to turn around. So if you're a parent in the hallway, you can be in a great situation where like if you see a parent getting on their own kid, you can almost bring that person down to reality, saying, wow, I love this back checking on that shift. If he back checks like that, he's getting in the lineup. Like, that coach is not going to miss that. Like, that's where you can help diffuse these situations and make it, I tend to use like sarcasm probably too much. But it's like, that's where you could kind of get in there and diffuse it a little bit for the parent. And most of the time, like our, the typical 24-hour rule, you wake up the next morning at breakfast and you forgot why you wanted to yell at your kid anyway. You're like, oh,
it takes a village. Right. That's the saying.
But you can support
right.
because like it's so easy as an outsider to see and feel the pain of a kid. Like you could see the kid like, oh, he's getting beat up by his dad. And you might have just gotten done doing it with your kid. I don't know. Right. But I'm just saying, if you have the ability to have a really strong community, that's a really great opportunity for you to step in there and be a peer and say, yeah, no, let him go. Let him go. His friends are waiting for him outside. And then maybe you can get the conversation going with that parent about, whatever, how good their kid is. And, oh, you know what? Did you hear that he led the team in cleaning up the locker room on the road trip? That's unbelievable. Like, that makes us look great. Like, what a great thing. Like, I'm so proud of that as a parent. When my kids' teams, there's kids on the teams that are being great role models, I want to tell those parents how great a role model they are for my kid. Like, and then not that they're a star player, they're just a player. They're a person on the team. Like, I've never understood how you could put somebody on a team and never play them. Like, I don't get that. Like, I don't even get, as an athlete, like, man, how would you go to practice every day and you have zero chance of playing? Right. So to me, like, okay, well, then what is it that drives a kid to keep coming back? It's community. It's feeling like they're progressing. It's feeling like somebody values them. It's feeling like they understand, okay, I'm not playing yet, but this is my goal and this is how I'm going to get there. If we can do that mentally for kids, at least now they can put the pieces together, right? It's not like every single game you're counting the minutes of how much ice time you got. It's not a question. It's just a statement.
No, we agree.
It's well put. One of the other things I want to talk about here, Tom, is you brought up this before the show, is not dogs barking, no, but ambiguity. In that a lot of time the messaging, and this happens to parents, it happens to coaches, can be missed, mainly because of the way we're presenting it. I did a podcast not too long ago. I talked about communication. And I always give the example. You could be the best tactician on the planet, but if you can't effectively communicate those tactics, what's the worth of it? Right. So it's the same thing with motivation and mental fitness and mental health. If you're trying to bring a kid up, you got to be able to meet them where they're at and bring them up. One of the common mistakes I see is coaches trying to tell the kid, well, hey, listen, wait till you get older because you got to go to your work every day. And then it's, you might have a spouse that's yelling at your kids. No 12-year-old cares. No 18-year-old cares, right? You got to meet them where they're at. They have a right to their 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old problems. You got to try and remember. Yeah, it's hard. You got to try and remember what it was like for you and have some empathy and then communicate. And it just does not mean there does not need to be discipline. It does not mean there does not need to be maybe a stern tone. Like, I was, when I bring this up to people, what are you going soft? No, there's just there's a way you have to communicate. So, Tom, the question to you here is, as a parent, as a coach, and as a former player, what are some tactics or tips for the group here to do that?
Well, I think, the ambiguity typically comes from the coach, and coaches, as I said to you, will intentionally sometimes want their players to be in the dark. I'm talking kind of the higher levels now,
For
and
sure.
things that I experienced, or things when I talk to pro players, or if I, even in college, coaches don't feel beholden to tell anyone anything, right? And I know you guys have done podcasts about that too, is where, it's the parent is no longer, part of the equation when it comes to the college hockey player. And so, yeah, it's, you can't go tell the coach, hey, could you be a little more clear and concise? You got to tell,
Right.
tell your kid, hey, you got to go talk to the coach and try to get some sort of communication going, because you're not getting any communication, or the communication you're getting is it's unclear, right? Ambiguity. And that's a terrible place to be for a player. Now, I will tell you this, the higher levels you're at, the coaches, they've been through these conversations a million times, and they will continue to hold true to their philosophy. They'll talk to you, but they know how to have a conversation and not really say anything or make any promises, because they don't want to be held to a promise that you're going to play more. Like, you can go say, I want more playing time, or I want a bigger role. And they're not going to just say, okay, right? They're going to talk to you, and they might give you some feedback on how you can do that or why you're not doing that. But they just generally have a way of talking about it. So I think at the end of the day, the best thing is to, try and arm our parents and our players with how to handle it. Right. And there is so much uncertainty and ambiguity in general. And everyone wants certainty. We all want our kid to, go into a tryout, and we'd love to know that he's going to make the team. She's going to make the team. But that's just unrealistic. So, the best thing is, I think probably one of the old axioms that you hear is control the controllables. Again, maybe easier said than done, but when you really get down to it, and it becomes, usually it's your actions or your effort and your attitude or your mindset. And those are the things you really can control. You can't control what, the puck's going to do, what your teammates are going to do, what the coaches are going to do. So I do think that is helpful to try and take that on. And then you can also expect it to be unexpected, expect it to be uncertain, expect there to be ambiguity, and just go, there's that ambiguity we always talk about, or have to deal with, and try and maybe make it a bit of a running joke. But it's hard. That's the hard part, when you're so intense and you want to get in the lineup, or you want to play more. And this is true for 15-year-olds and 12-year-olds too, I suppose, because you're not always, the coach isn't going to always have the same, penalty killer and power play, and they tend to lean on their better players, and that gets frustrating. But then the communication, if it's not clear, if it's kind of foggy, then we're back to that ambiguity. And I don't know. I think that the best thing you can try to do is learn how to handle it, or you can ask for more clarity.
Tom, I'll tell you a quick story about that. And it's a good one. It's almost a paradox story to me. I knew a young man who playing in the minors, right? Very, very talented player. You could easily say one of the most talented players on the team. Coach played him 5 shifts a game, and he could not understand it, but I give him credit. He was always mentally tough. And you know what would happen? He would score every game with those 5 shifts. So he got to a point of, well, why isn't he playing me more? I'm scoring more. Coach kept giving him 5 shifts every game, 5 shifts, goal, 5 shifts, goal. Well, the coach knew exactly what he was doing because he knows in that situation that guy's going to give his best for 5 shifts. And he might think that in a full game, he's not going to. And the player obviously was upset. He goes, I want more shifts. But it was one of those situations, again, this was the minors, where they both understood what they needed to do. They won the championship together. The player was not ecstatic. The coach was ecstatic. But, the following season, the player moved up to a higher level. The coach won the championship and they replaced him. My point to you is this, people, is that you don't always have to like your role. You don't always, but it's important to have a role. And that I don't think the communication was great, but they both had an understanding of how to do that in a way that would be conducive for the team. But it's not always going to be it's not always you get what you want, right? That was an example of a coach understanding a player, at least from his point of view, and a player
Motivating
accepting
him.
it.
Thought he was doing the right thing to motivate him.
Right. And again, whether I agree with that or not is irrelevant. Clearly the results were there.
Yeah. So Tom, I mean, we talk about this a lot on the episodes, actually often, about, preparing your player and your family for what teams you choose to go to, right? If you don't want ambiguity, then don't go to a coach that doesn't communicate. Like if, I'd rather, I can't tell you, like right now, this is the silly season for me as like a hockey, in my advisory roles with youth hockey parents, right? Because, oh, that team you told me not to go to? Oh my God, my kid is miserable. Like I knew, we probably shouldn't have went there. I know it's a higher level, but the coach, he doesn't play as much. He's not playing as much as he did last year. The coach doesn't communicate with him. I'm like, well, I told you that though last year. The coach was that coach. Like, well, I know, but they play at a higher level. But what do you care? Your kid's not even playing, so they're not even being affected by the higher level. Like, to me, that's where your research has to come in, good or bad. Hey, listen, there's other coaches that I say, well, you knew what you were getting into. Like, yeah, I guess I did. I knew that this person wasn't going to communicate with me. Okay, then you knew that going in. So don't all of a sudden say, well, how come the coach hasn't changed to me? Well, because you chose the coach. There's plenty of programs, right? So I think that's one of the pieces. Now, can coaches be educated and do a better job of learning how and why the need is to communicate to help their teams perform? But just to Lee's story, maybe they don't need to. I mean, listen,
Depends on the
remember
level.
as a college coach, I probably played, I don't want to even call it head games, but motivational pushes and pulls to make sure because I thought I knew my athlete. That athlete was pissed, but you know what? He's so pissed that he scored a goal, or he's so pissed that he got the MVP of the weekend tournament, or he's so pissed that he drove his teammates to drive like a kind of a Herb Brooks short series philosophy. Like people are like at the time probably like, oh, what an a-hole this guy is, or oh, I can't believe this guy just doesn't want to, he doesn't like us. Well, it doesn't matter. He found pushing buttons, right? And I think a lot of that's an art, though. I think that's really it's hard to do, or else everybody would do it. But I think if we fall on the side of let's communicate, let's express our feelings to our players, let's let them know where we stand. Always, I feel is better than not than silence. And I think that's just especially at the young levels, because let's face it, you're coaching the kid and the parent. It's a team effort at 12 years old, at 13 years old, 15 years old, even 16 years old. The kids are still living with the family. Like, so if you want to keep the dinner table from being against you, then get everybody together and say, well, this is why we're doing it. Now, you might not agree with me, which is fine. Somebody has to make a decision. I'm just letting you know how I feel about it. And then we can work together on how you can change my mind or I can change your mind. Whatever it is, let's just have that conversation about what it is. And I think then this discussion about mental health that we have with our kids and the anxiety and not knowing and the uncertainty, that's what I think really affects teenagers is I just don't know. The coach just keeps telling me to work harder. Well, what the heck does that mean? Like, what does that mean? You work harder. I'm working hard. I'm working hard. And the coach said, well, what I mean is, let me show you 5 videos where you pulled up, curled off, and did nothing inside the zone. Oh, okay. Well, that's to me, that's something that's not subjective. That's like you're doing it or you're not doing it. Or, hey, let's discuss with mom and dad. Have you had the discussion with mom and dad how you haven't been to practice on time in 16 weeks in a row, and yet they drop you off on time? So what are you doing? Where are you? What are you doing hanging out? You're not prepared. So let's have that conversation so that now mom and dad can look and go, well, what the heck? He didn't tell me that. Of course he didn't tell you that. It's like my kid. Hey, did your homework? Yeah, I did it on the bus. There's no way you did your homework on the bus. Like, how is that possible? No, I did it on the bus. And then you find out, a week later, he hadn't done his homework. So it's just a matter of have that conversation. The quicker you can have it, and having it more often, right, is to me a right. It's a parent right to be able to say, okay, son, have you talked to your coach? Yes. Has he given you an answer? No. Have you asked him to meet with all of us? Yes. Has he given an answer? No. Okay, now I'm going to intervene. Now we're going to have a conversation together because I want my son to be able to communicate with me what he thinks and why he is in the situation he's in. Now, again, when you leave the room, it's not you must do what I want you to do because I'm the parent. It's I just want to understand what's happening so that I can coach my son or daughter to be the best athlete for you. And I think if parents approach that differently to coaches, they now become advocate instead of an adversary. And then the coach is like, wow, if I could get this parent, if I really want to motivate this kid, I got to get the parent on my side and help me motivate the kid. And that's I mean, to me, I don't know, that's coaching. That's the funnest part. Like that's the greatest part about coaching is coaching.
Right. There's a big divide though. Now you're talking about coaches and them being ideal, right? And being open to that type of communication. And again, it's at different levels. There's different, I guess, philosophies about it. But the hardest thing, is coach gets to be who coach wants to be. And he or she wants to keep an arm's length between parents and maybe also, like I said, wants to keep a player guessing. As Lee was talking about, sometimes a coach will be hard on a player because they think that's what's going to motivate them. Now that's a bit of an art form, and it's a higher level of coaching. Usually, at the youth levels, it's just a coach who doesn't have faith in a player, he doesn't believe in him or her, and he's going to try to, short shift them or not play him as much.
It's easier to bury the player, right? It's easier to bury the player on the bench than coach them.
Yeah, because they're not going to get better in the moment typically, right. Unless, long term, you should play them and you should be willing to, let them fail or let the team lose a game, more important than crushing a kid's spirit. But that's just maybe not realistic. Right. So it's hard to get everyone on the same page, but I do think, to your point, I will say, I do think coaches, it would go a long way if they would be a little more open to some communicating back and forth. I always think a coach could communicate sort of to the team in a mass email. Here's what's going on with our team, blah, blah, blah. And would keep the parents at bay a little bit, right? You don't have to right. Put in the email why you sat Johnny or Janie and get personal or too detailed, but coaches don't want to communicate anything, it seems, a lot of times, and that leaves the parents in the dark. And I think sometimes coaches will also tell the kids, hey kids, just don't talk to your parents. And then we don't know that because the kid doesn't say coach told me not to talk to you. They just don't want to talk to you. So
well, and the best part is if you're a good art, it's an art form too of writing an email directed at one parent that sounds like you're talking to all the parents, because all the parents know who you're talking about. What we should do as a team, we should do a little better job of not jumping up on the glass and yelling at the officials. Well, that, as a team, this will help us, right. Really, so I think parents, listen, if you're on a team, everyone knows what's going on, right? So it's just, I think that point, Tom, of coordinating an ability to say, listen, even if you just send out a generic email, something that just says, here's where we're at, this is what I love doing, this is what we're trying to do. And then at least the parents are like, okay, the guy's got a plan at least. Now I might not like the plan, I think he's an idiot, but at least I know he thinks he has a plan. It's the parents that once you allow the little opening, right? And then you get the group of dads over here in the corner and the moms over here. And now you got the parents that are friends. Silos. And now all those little silos of people are saying, like all of a sudden it breaks down. And unfortunately, in my experience, you're seeing that earlier and earlier and earlier in the season. Oh, I totally sometimes it's like after the first weekend tournament, like, oh my God, what the hell did we get into? And it's September. Like, well, but so instead, just like, you might just be proactive as in a coaching staff. And I think, and we've probably had this conversation on the podcast before, it doesn't even have to come from you. If you have an assistant coach that's a great communicator and loves writing emails, then let them be the communication person. Let them be the conduit for you. Or if you have a parent that is, somewhat sane, a manager, somebody that's like I've always felt that more people in your inner circle from a coach, especially at the youth hockey level, because everyone, parents are the staff. The more people you have doing assignments with you and for you, the better it is for you as a coach, because there's more people in the camp that can say, no, you guys see what this guy's doing. Like, he's really trying here, or no, he wants to do this, but maybe your kid has to come to practice once every 4 weeks. Like, that will help him play. Like things like that, where you get advocates on your side. And again, I'm talking about 12 to 15. Yeah, Mike, I think we should. And because we're talking about mental health, that's really where the breakdown occurs, because let's face it, whatever the parents are saying in the car, is going back to the kid. And I think back to our original conversation, most of the time it's in Snapchat and it's privately. And the parents don't even know that the kid's getting, like, oh my God, I can't believe your dad said this, or I can't believe, your mom did this. Like, we're not even seeing those conversations as parents.
I want to jump in with a few things, just so, like, giving some tips to parents and really coaches out there. So number one, Mike, you alluded to this. We should say there's a definite breakdown between the levels. Like, when you're in a pro environment, or I should say a paid environment, it's a job, right? And you're being paid to win. So I feel that, and Tom, you can feel free to tell me if you agree or disagree with this, but pro coaches that succeed tend to have a high level of emotional intelligence. They know how to motivate players. Now, let's take it off the pros for a minute, because most of you listening are not coaching pro hockey, right? Which is fine. There's a lot of things you can do to get this on your team. We talked earlier about, well, I don't know how that kid's motivated. I've heard that. I don't know how to motivate that kid. Well, there's a really simple solution to that. Ask the kid how they're motivated. We don't do these incredibly simple things. Well, they're not going to answer me. That means the trust doesn't exist there. All right. You can find out a lot about a kid just by talking with them or asking questions. Does it motivate you when you're yelled at? First off, most of them are going to say no. Guarantee you a couple of them will say yes. I've always been shocked, but I've always had kids say, no, I like it when you're on top of me, like, and yelling at me. Like, that motivates me.
I love the kid at the end of practice, like, coach, you should skate more. I'm like, really? Okay, let's do that. Let's do it. Like, I'm like, oh, that's so boring. Like, I don't want to skate you. So why don't we do something different?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, everyone's motivated differently. I know. I think about the failures of myself as a player in college and other levels, and it's a two-way street, right? I had coaches that I don't feel adequately. That's the word I was looking for. Knew how to motivate me. Now, at the same time, I wasn't really open to them because the way I was at that age. So this is a two-way street. Yeah. But one is to just ask simple questions. What motivates you? What demotivates you? All right. What do you want to accomplish? That's one. Number two is breaking this misconception. I can't speak for all coaches with this. This is just my style. But there's a misconception that power and control as a coach come from not talking or withholding information, as I'm going to keep this close to my chest because then I have one up on you. And in my experience, guys, that just breeds mistrust. It breeds silos and cliques. It creates problems. The best coaches understand you have to develop trust with everyone, players, parents, and the staff. And that can be done very early in the season. It's not hard to develop a rudimentary system of trust of I'm going to communicate. And then you got to communicate. All right. I say this all the time. 10 out of 10 problems, all of them, happen because of poor communication. There's absolutely other reasons for it, but bad communication will always breed problems. It doesn't matter the scenario, right? So I'll give you a quick example, and Tom, I definitely want you to dive into this. Dawn Staley, who is an NCAA championship coach. She is probably the greatest women's basketball coach in history. She is revered by coaches, men and women everywhere. I had the privilege to sit with her at the Philadelphia Coaches Conference, and she said something that shocked me. Because somebody asked her, how do you deal with the parents? And I was expecting her to say, well, I just don't. This is collegiate basketball. And she said, you know what? The last few years, I've flipped myself on that. I actually have a monthly Zoom call with all the parents to inform them, Mike, as you said, in a group environment, a team environment, here's what's happening. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. And she goes, I openly communicate with them in that environment. It's not excessive, but I have that communication. And she said this, and this is what really hit me. She said, because it doesn't matter what I say. At the end of the day, they're going home to their parents or they're talking to their parents, and that's the biggest influence in their life. And I'd be crazy not to tap into that. Yeah. She's so right. She is so right on that. Now, again, is it easy for her? I'm sure it's not. Okay. Does she want to do it? I'd say 99% chance, probably not. But she understands that communication piece has to be there for the trust to exist between her and the parent, her and the player. And again, the work speaks for itself. This woman wins all the time. Like, there's no way around that. She is the greatest at what she does. So I just wanted to share that. But Tom, Mike and I are sucking up all the oxygen because we're from the Northeast. It's your turn to talk. I'm even going to mute my microphone.
No, I love what you just said about Dawn Staley. I think I agree with that a lot. And that's what I've been trying to get at, but I think it's asking a lot to flip the whole coaching culture, 180. I'm a little pessimistic still, and jaded when it comes to the way coaches are communicating, because again, I've got in my peer group and friends and relatives and everything, I've got more friends and relatives that are playing at college hockey or pro hockey, and I've been through it, right? And I came from the old school way, so it was pretty barbaric at times.
Right.
But I do think the way you do the way she does those calls, and you said, does she like to do it? Probably not. No, but she knows that she understands how important it is. And I would guess that the more you do it, you fine tune it, and you start to figure out the level of information which you are willing to put out there.
Right.
And
you
again,
give
and
it all away, right?
hopefully
that.
No, she's not giving it. The coach doesn't have to give it all away. Just some really broad concepts of where the team's at, and if you started saying, well, we're really working on our offense this week because our scoring's down, or we're really working on our defense because we got to get our goals against down. Our goaltending, if you look at the save percentage, has been fine. So it's, the goalies are making the saves, but we're just giving up too many shots, whatever. Like you can, and then all of a sudden parents feel like you're including them. Right. And all of a sudden they're like, and you'd be educating them a little bit. Right. And then if a parent has any honest integrity and understands their son or daughter's, strengths and weaknesses, they might look and go, my son or daughter's -7. And so they're on the wrong side of the plus minus thing. Not that that's the most, I'm just using an example. Right.
Sure, yeah.
And it'd be like, well, coach said in our call that they're really concerned about our goals against, and Johnny's been out there for, 2 of the last 6 goals that have been scored against our team. I get it. That's why he's in the doghouse. That would be great. And, but even I don't get that type of feedback. Another thing that you were talking about earlier about what motivates you, go talk to them. I agree. That's great communication. The flip side, the other side of the coin, just to play devil's advocate here, is, some coaches will say, and I don't know what level, maybe not at the lower levels, but starting at, 15 or maybe even 13, 14, can a coach say to a player, hey, if I have to motivate you, maybe you're in the wrong business. Maybe if you need me to, pump your tires and pat you on the back and blow some smoke, then maybe hockey isn't for you. It's sort of like coaches have enough to worry about than trying to motivate each player.
Right.
But Tom, I think that's a great point. So how we as parents, because I would do it with my kids' teachers. Like I would literally be like, okay, listen, I would be in that conversation, right? We're not asking for a 13-year-old to maybe articulate, like, and maybe it's not like, how do you motivate me? It's more like, well, coach, when I just feel, coach, I just want to let you know, I feel that you're pointing my flaws out and what I'm doing wrong more than other players. Oh, I didn't even realize I was doing that. Well, you know why I'm doing it? It's because I just expect so much more out of you than those other knuckleheads. Like I'm thinking like, oh my God, like my expectation for you now, and that all of a sudden changes the whole conversation with a kid. It's like, because I used to tell like even the players that I was playing with as a player, I'm like, he's all over you because we need you. Like trust me, if a coach isn't saying anything to you, that's terrible. That's like, a bad thing. That's like he's not even yelling at me. Like, holy smoke, he just wants me to get out. Like he's just hoping I quit, right? Because I don't even have the energy to yell at you. And so to me, it's like I've often found like when a coach is flipping their lid or strategically like playing head games or whatever, they're doing it because they expect more out of you. And if you could tell a 13-year-old that, sometimes that's all the motivation you need. Like, hey, listen, you better take it, buddy, because I'm going to be flinging arrows at you for the next month. Like, I need you to elevate this team because I expect this out of you. Now, the player might turn around and be like, I can't take that pressure, coach. Like, that's just not me. Now, maybe, Tom, that's the conversation. Be like, well, this is it's tough to be in sports. Like, it's just tough to be in any sport. It's tough to be in any competitive environment. If you're the chess coach and you just can't take the chess coach breathing over your shoulder, telling you have no time, like then maybe it's just not you. Maybe you're not the pressure. Like our job as coaches is to teach how to perform under pressure. So,
Well,
so
yeah.
then how, but
Yeah.
what is that pressure? Is the pressure negative pressure, positive pressure? Is it pressure that the player wants? And again, I think I would be in the same situation. Like, okay, wait a minute. You're telling me how you want me to motivate you? What the hell? That's my
Well,
job.
and let me jump back in here too, because this is actually a great conversation. It's a great topic. And I'll tell you kind of what I've learned from my research, right? Because Tom, you're right. Especially at the higher levels, you should be able to be motivated. What I'm looking for at a higher level, and the teams that I've coached that have succeeded and won, when we ask that question, keeping in mind that when I say I ask this question, it's in a preseason type environment. There's multiple coaches doing it. And we say, how are you motivated? I'm not looking for I am motivated this way, right? I like it when I see this again on the winning teams. Well, what motivates me is when we win, or what motivates me is when my teammates work hard, or what demotivates me is when my teammates aren't given everything they have. To me, that's a really good answer. It's a really good sign. But these are young men and women who have, again, the emotional intelligence. It's been developed that it's, I know how I'm motivated. I want to motivate my team. There's a higher level of accountability here. So rounding out this entire conversation, and this is where, Tom, you're probably right to be a little pessimistic, but I'm hopeful that we can change this in the future. This is where it starts at Adam level hockey all the way up, of how intelligent emotionally are we helping our kids become? Do they understand what they're feeling? Can we help them control those emotions? Do they understand that I don't like it when I'm yelled at, or I like it when I'm yelled at, and I need to effectively communicate to my coach, who may not listen, which is part of it? This is how I'm motivated. And then can they get to a higher level of accountability with that, right? I am motivated. I'm talking about myself now. Keep in mind, I'm just playing adult league hockey, but I still keep this kind of philosophy. I'm motivated when my teammates do well. When one of my teammates scores, I'm super motivated by that. I'm excited by that. When my teammates help each other, that's just where I'm at. Okay. Not to keep this on me. I'm just saying that this comes back to what you said, talking about dignity and understanding. And you're right. As a parent, if your kid is having a hard time emotionally at 15 or 16 about being motivated, this is on the parent too, to have that conversation with their kid of, look, you're playing at a high level. Your coach's job is not to make sure that you're happy all the time. Your coach's job is to help the team win. Yeah. How are you motivated, son, daughter? Let's learn about this. Let's become emotionally intelligent. Yeah. Keeping in mind too, parents, that the last, 15, 16, 17 years of their life, you've been the beacon of them for that. All right. Which is never fun or easy. If kids do anything, Mike, they show us our own imperfections, and there's really a couple ways of dealing with that.
Yeah, it's hard conversations. Like, what are you doing to demotivate the coach? Like, what are you doing to demotivate that team?
Two-way
street. I just recently had a conversation with a student athlete who was like, "Oh, nobody likes that kid on the team." I go, "Do you like him?" Yeah, I don't mind him. He's okay. I go, then why don't you be the beacon of light? Why don't you be the one that says, let's not talk about the kid when he leaves the locker room. Why don't we talk about when he's in the locker room? Oh, we really need to be on time. Hey, you got to stop riding the coach, because you could really help us. And again, I'm not expecting 12 and 13 and 14-year-old men and women and girls and boys to understand that. We have to coach them to do that. We have to give them the tools to say, what you could do differently. You don't have to jump on the Twitter bandwagon and throw out the 140 character beat down of the kid when he leaves the locker room. You could actually be the one that says, wow, wouldn't it be cool if this kid showed up on time? And what can we do to help get this player to be on our team and contribute more? And to me, again, that's a learned behavior. That's not, and I'm not saying that's easy, because Tom even brought it up earlier. Like, it happens in work, it happens in real life. But these are the skills we want to teach our kids, that when you can do that at 13, 14, 15 years old, and when your career is over and your identity is no longer a professional paid hockey player, you can now take that into any environment. And even I would expect that from the pro guys that I work with that played pro hockey, that now I work with at the youth hockey level. I'm like, do you know what kind of influence you have? I'm sure, Tom, when you walk into and you're in the stands, your influence, good or bad, is so much stronger than the average parent, because it just is. Because you can say, listen, guys, we could tone it down, but this kid, I see a lot. Look I think this kid's a good player, and wow, they're on our team. We're not doing any. Nobody's getting traded December 15th, from my midget AAA team. So what can we do to make this person a part of helping us win? Because I want to win. So I'm not going to win without this team, right? And again, those aren't easy. I get it. Or for me, I just go stand in the corner and not listen to anyone. But don't even get involved.
Yeah,
I know the conversation can go a thousand different ways, but I think I much rather see the people that are in these situations for change to be proactive instead of just laying back and saying, hey, it's the way it is. These people are nuts. And then that's a bad, like for me, I get into that and I'm like, okay, why am I even sticking my nose in this? And I should.
Yeah, I've been there.
But I'm like, I need to. Let me, I got to make the comment. And then you just kind of stand back and say, hey, listen, if you don't believe me, that's fine. The only analogy I can ever give, like usually that works, for me is like, listen, I'm not a car mechanic. You ask me to change the oil in my car, you're probably blowing your engine. But I do this. Like I'm around a lot of athletes. I'm around a lot of parents. I'm around a lot of kids, and I get to hear the cradle to grave stories. I get to hear the kid that started at 8, and then at 18, the parents like, I can't believe it's over. Like, wow, did that go fast? Or holy moly, I wish I would have done this. Okay, well, let's learn from all those people that said I wish I would have done this. And then said, okay, well, is it really, really that important to do this? Or can we do this and have the same outcome? I don't know. It just takes the people that are the leadership positions, have the knowledge base, and have the personality, the ability to speak instead of just laying low and saying, okay, I'm going to watch this parent's house burn down because I don't want to be involved. Like I tend not to be that person. And a lot of the people that I'm around tend not to be those people. So instead of being like the voice of like bad, right? Just be the voice of reason. And that, again, it's not easy, and sometimes you got to walk away, but sometimes you can really make an impact. And I don't know, I'd rather be the person that's trying to make the impact than the person that walks away.
Yeah.
Not a question, just a statement.
No, I know. I think I've been in those situations that you're talking about. And I think sometimes I've been a good influence. And I think sometimes I've been a bad influence. Sometimes the expertise in my background and experiences comes out, and I've been critical of coaches.
Yeah.
And I'm not proud of it. It's a shortcoming of mine to be pretty convicted about my beliefs. And so you're like, it's just like, yes, I should bite my tongue sometimes. But sometimes I just have to say it, like
my wife reminds me to bite my tongue, but so that's my voice to reach. Like, don't do it. Don't do
it.
Don't go there. Don't go there.
But to kind of bring this back to, the mental health thing and maybe some things that are helpful, a book I've been reading lately, by Ray Dalio, it's principles of life and principles of work. And his number one thing is be a hyper realist. And it's about being very honest with yourself and honest about your kid and honest about, really what you want. Right. And then now we're talking about values. So, and I talked, I think in our last podcast with you guys about, I hate seeing the game get more out of the player than the player gets out of the game.
Yeah.
Or the tail wagging the dog kind of thing. It's like, parents and players when you're younger, you could probably do yourself a little bit of favor to take a little inventory on what you value and what you really want out of this. They say, oh, I just want to have fun. Okay, well, if that's really the case, then be hyper realistic, as Ray Dalio would say, and say, you know what? We're not going to try out for the top team, or even if my kid made the top team because he's skilled enough. But if he's going to be on the third or fourth line and not play as much as the other, he's good enough to be on the top team, but he's not ready for that type of pressure. Or as a family, we don't value status over playing time. We don't value hockey over mental health, because a lot of people do. And I probably would have too. Like if my kid could have made the top team, I'd probably put him on the top team. And then, but then if knowing what I know now down the road and having just read this book and now adopted this philosophy of being a hyper realistic about really what you want and values aligning with who you are or who your kid is, or ask your kid when he starts to be 12 or 13, they probably haven't identified their values. But if you had a conversation and he said, what do you really value? Do you value the friendships? Do you value the hard? Do you value the challenge? And to because if that's what you are up for, then great, we'll go for it. But if a kid can be honest, or if you're, as a parent, you kind of know your kid, and it's harder when they're 12 than when they're 18, because you've had a few more years of those teen years, and they have started to evolve into that young adult. You might know them better, but I just think that being really realistic about what you want. You said it kind of earlier out of a sport. And you can control some of that anxiety, some of that pressure, some of the things that you really value. And if, like, communication, you got to, in youth hockey and tryouts, you can't get to the coach before the tryouts and say, hey, what kind of communicator are you? Because if my kid makes your team, but you don't communicate well, I don't want to be on that team, but unfortunately, but you can ask around, you can ask as you're, here's maybe another tactic for parents is, as your kid is entering that next level, as they're going into it, try to do a little homework, try to do a little research, try to find out if Johnny or Janie makes this team, what to expect. And then really maybe do a hard look at, is that a coach that we want to play for? Just because they're, it's the top team. Ideally, typically you want your player on the top team, but not if it's going to not be enjoyable or not fun, then maybe you just opt out.
It's funny, Tom, because I don't make, but one of my main suggestions for the organizations I work with, now I work with a lot, but the ones that listen and want to evolve, right, is we develop, like, your coaches have to have a mission statement and have to have a coaching philosophy. Like, if you try to get a college job or a high school job or a prep school job, the first question is going to be, okay, give me your coaching philosophy. Give me who you are as a coach. Because I want to know beforehand, like, yeah, you won games, you did this, you did that, but I need to know, like, what's your own mission statement? And I think we could do that at the youth level. There's no reason at all that a coach can't give, what their mission statement and philosophy is ahead of time. And I would think as a coach, I'd want to say that too, because I don't want players coming to me and then me dealing with all this drama later on. Like, why can't I
even operate without that? Like I'm with you.
Well, because some coaches say, "Oh, I played in the show, and my kid played hockey at a high level, so now therefore I can coach at a high level." And I don't know if that's the case. I want to know who the person is, and if I'm paying $8, $9, $10, $15, $25,000 a year to play hockey, I want to know, me as a coach, I want to hire kids that can play under my philosophy. Because again, to Tom's point earlier, I'm not going to change. Like, this is who you're getting. Like, I know who I am. I'm an adult. I know where I am and what my philosophy is and how I want to do it. Now, because a lot of times people, like, I know for a fact, like with me, parents will shy away from me because in my mission statement is I will not play just to win. Like, I will not play just for a score. I'm going to play for a long-term success of a student and an athlete. And that one weekend is not going to change how I want to go about things. It just won't. So just know that your kid's not going to be sitting at the end of the bench, no matter now, unless it's like something, real, like egregious, like, okay, you're late. Or for instance, like if you're going to a tournament with me and you got a tin of chewing tobacco in your room with an underclassman, you're probably going to sit. But if you're, but if you're doing your job, you're showing for practice, you're on my team, I picked you. If I picked you, then I'm telling you how smart I am, that I know how to evaluate talent. You're going to play. Mike, but I want parents to know that.
This is what I say. And actually, Tom, this is a good segue, because the last note I have on my sheet here is to talk about dignity and personality, which is what I think we're getting into here. But again, quick actionable items. This is mine. You don't have to do it, although this is used at some pretty high levels. Every coach, every parent, everybody that's doing a job, you should have a vision, a grand vision of what you want to accomplish during your tenure in that role. You should have a mission, which is what you want to accomplish in the year or the season. Then you should be having objectives and tactics on the monthly and daily basis on how you're going to achieve those things. But if you walk into a locker room, and this does not have to be complicated, if you walk into a locker room and you are not sharing any of that with your team, you are destined to fail. You are just destined to fail. All right. How are they supposed to follow you if they don't know where they're going? And it looks like you don't know where you're going if you don't tell them that. So vision, mission, objectives, and tactics, I think, are a simple way to do it. You should take a few minutes, and you should revisit those often, because they can change. Your vision can absolutely change over the course of a few years as your team evolves, or your job evolves, or your whatever it is that you're doing evolves. But again, Tom, I want to turn to you about everything Mike said, but just also dignity, because you brought that word up in the pre-show. I think it's a really important one we need to discuss and kind of get your definition of it.
Well, yeah, I think it's really unfortunate when coaches, get critical or critique and give feedback that attacks the dignity of a player. And I don't know. I'm not in every youth hockey locker room, but I don't think it's too pervasive. But from my own experiences, and the higher up you get, and coaches are harder and harder on players, it can happen in the high school level. And I've heard in say in midget or bantams and or major teams like that, the coaches start to be, they still might be that old school mentality, and you can be hard on a player for how they're playing, and usually it should be their effort, right? And or if they're making repeated mistakes, then a coach can get into a guy and say, you know what, you keep making the same mistake. We've talked about it time and time again. But anyway, if they're gonna use language and communication and feedback that attacks, a player's personality, right, or their dignity, that's now we're getting into an area where it could really impact the player emotionally and significantly. And so you don't want to ever hear that happens. Now, one of the ways you sort of just talked about having a mission and a purpose and having some objectives and tactics. The other thing that is helpful for coaches is if they have, their team has an identity, right? Give the team an identity. Right. Maybe you're fast and furious, or you're small but sneaky, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You give them an identity, and then you can do that with players too. And then if your player is playing to his identity, all you can do is compliment them on that. Hey, we agreed to, this is your identity. And maybe the player isn't going to score a lot and make a lot of plays, but if they're fast and can take away time and space, if they're not afraid to be physical and finish checks, and then they do that, a coach should be able to pay them some compliments that they're meeting their identity. Because a kid might feel bad that they don't score ever. And, but if you keep going to them and going, you know what, I know you haven't scored, but remember what we talked about. Your identity isn't to be our goal scorer. We got some guys that are scoring, and hey, we're still winning, and you're part of that. So that actually gives dignity, then takes it away.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's just what it does too. It's taking a couple of roles, right? It's number one, helping identify identities within a team, because everybody can't be the first line centerman. Like, everybody can't be the leading goal scorer. Somebody's got to do something else, right? And I think you see it at the pro level, especially when you watch guys that are specialists, like penalty kill special. Like, somebody says, okay, I'm not going to get a lot of ice time, but when I do get out there, I can guarantee you that puck's not getting over the red line. Like this, I'm not going to lose my man, or I'm a defenseman that, like, I talk to a lot of D now that are real D, like just defense, not Cale Makar, not Adam Fox, not, these are just defensemen. Like, somebody's got to play D. I don't care how the game goes. It doesn't, no matter where the game goes, somebody still has to play D. So take that as a badge of honor. Take that role and that dignity of, like, listen, nobody's beating me one-on-one. I might not go end to end and put a top shelf goal in. I'm not doing a Zegras behind the net, but I could tell you right now, what I'm going to do is, you're not going to get by me. And I'm going to make sure that I position my play, my area. I'm going to protect my zone, and I'm going to get, my dignity is going to be, I'm going to get pucks up to you, get goal scorers score. I play D. I don't want my first line centerman stuck on the point because it's ugly, right? And I think, and certain kids, I think that goes to, a way you as a coach now can, give people identity and give people dignity and give people an opportunity to have success based off of what you value, and saying, okay, listen, I don't need you to be this guy, but I love the fact that you're this guy. And what a great way to right. frame that, because you can do that to any player at any level. I think you're the best door opener in the whole county. I think you open the door better than anyone. And you got, if you keep doing that for us, you're helping our team win, or whatever, whatever it is. But I think it's, if you give kids little, that's why people love, like, getting back to Lee's point in the beginning. That's why people love being a part of community. That's why you stay on a team when you're not the leading goal scorer. You stay on a team because you feel there's value, that that you're valuable. But who wants to be on a team that you don't feel valuable on?
Yeah, let me jump in. The challenge there will be, though, typically a parent will think that their son or daughter is the superstar, or they want him to be more of the scorer. They go, "Oh, my son's," and I've seen it because I've run a junior team, and I've had my kids go through that level, and I know when I was running the junior team that, that's, I guess could happen in high school too, but junior was really where, and I saw it in pro too, is where you really have to get realistic. As I mentioned, that's why I really value this book by Ray Dalio, and the number one important principle is being realistic. And it's hard for parents to be realistic sometimes with what their kid's ability is. And it takes a lot of work to communicate them, if you are a coach, to say, Mr. Jones, I know you think Jimmy is a goal scorer, but he's just not compared to these other 6 guys I have. So if he's going to be on our team, we need him to play a certain role. Now, and that's what I think there's value in it. I think it's really, because now you're not taking away someone's dignity. You're actually trying to give them an identity on the team and a role. But that's the challenge there, is that, because I saw it in junior, these kids would want to keep being goal scorers because that's what they were back in midget or high school. And as an expert, you can evaluate them and go, look, you can skate and you're pretty big. I know you scored some goals at the school you were at last year, but you actually played in kind of a weak league. You played with the other 2 best players. I'm just telling you, on this team, I need you to be this. And hopefully when they're 18, 19 years old, they can start to accept that. But I'm telling you, even at that level, old habits die hard. Oh, yeah. And they'll nod their head and say, yep, got it, coach. Yep, I got it. And then they go out and they can still see them trying to, dangle toe pull at the blue line because they want to beat that guy out of the zone, and they turn it over and it ends up in the back of the net. And you're like, I'm trying to tell you how you should play, and that's not how I want you to play.
Right. But isn't that the great part about, being an ability to have that thought, like, like coming in and saying, listen, I know where you are at 10 and 12 and 15 and 18, but now I have 18 of you. Like, and now you need to change your role. Or that's why kids, listen, there's a reason why the top of the pyramid is so small. It's because all the kids that can't evolve or can't take that role or can't take that advice and can't then pivot and say, oh boy, you know what? This person sees me in this different light. And if I can change my game because I have all these other core skills to help me, then I can, my career can keep progressing. And I think that's where, I mean, I hate to say it, but it comes back to communication and trust. And
why do you hate to say that, Mike?
Because because none of us communicate well enough.
I know.
Well, we're also back to identity and purpose, right? Like all of a sudden these kids, I mean, this is just to kind of bring it back to mental health. That's where I see a lot of, at the junior level, was these kids all of a sudden being told they aren't who they think they are.
Right.
And it's not handled well, typically. Coaches have too many players to choose from, and they don't have time to, try and convince them. And so they just go, you know what, this guy gets it. Yeah. He gets his role. I've got this other guy who actually could be pretty good, but I know that they're not going to accept this role, and they don't really want it. And they don't want to adjust. And then or they do keep them, and they try to talk to them and tell them they're going to change. And the player says, yeah, but I think I can be something else. And this is where mental health starts to break down, and they start to get, have problems because their identity is changing, or someone's asking them to change their identity. And now the player's questioning 2 things. I thought I was a goal scorer, or I thought I was a good hockey player. This coach is telling me I'm a plugger, right? I'm a grinder. Or I thought I really loved hockey. I can tell you this too. It's a gauntlet. The higher you go, it gets more and more competitive. And that's another thing that's hard for players to accept, that all of a sudden it's really hard, and they start questioning, do I really like hockey? And then they have to come to a realistic, a realistic determination that, what, I think I was playing hockey for the social elements of it, for the camaraderie, for the call it the brotherhood or sisterhood, for the community of it. But it's lost its purpose, and I don't think I like it anymore.
And then right there, Tom, right? What have you lost? All three things. You've lost your identity, you've lost your purpose, and you've lost your community in one swoop.
Right.
And that's why these are so important. And again, kind of rounding the episode out, parents, coaches of the youth levels, right? These are things that, in my opinion, it's on us to help these kids learn. And again, it's about equipping them with tools so they can do it themselves. I mean, I always, that's one of the tough parts of parenting. It's, you want to do it for them half the time, but the truth is you got to teach them to fish, not just give them the fish, right? So when it comes to identity, purpose, and community, and Tom, you said this earlier, just start having conversations about those words. You can do this at a very young age. You can do this in the teenage years of, hey, what do you think your identity is? Well, I'm a hockey player. All right, well, okay, let's just say your kid says that. You're not going to convince them otherwise. Tom, you were just talking about this. Mike, you were just talking about this. What I would do, I think, if this happens for me, and I wish someone had done this for me, is if I identify as a goal scorer when I'm 16, I want to start having conversations about Steve Yzerman and how Steve Yzerman completely changed the way he played the game to win Stanley Cups. He became a defensive forward at one point of his career when he was one of the greatest goal scorers in the league, right? So then have that conversation with your kid of, what would make you really great if you're well-rounded in different identities of being a grinder, being a goal scorer, being a playmaker, being a good teammate, being the fourth line guy. And I'm not saying you should try all those things, but opening them up to that, hey, the more tools you have in your toolkit, the more valuable you're going to be in an older, higher level. I always tell parents all the time, if you feel like your kid's struggling, look at your team and find the gaps. Man, we don't have a playmaker, right? Well, you can create a role for yourself. If you become a great playmaker, odds are the coach is probably going to see that. Hopefully, sometimes coaches don't see assists like they should. We're not going to go into that. That's a whole nother episode. All right. But it's about communicating, teaching, identity, purpose, community, understanding what trust is, understanding what, dignity is. I think that's another great word you bring up. We don't talk about enough on this show. It's just dignity, and how easy it is to take that away from a kid by your communication or lack thereof. So again, rounding this out, Tom, again, because we've been talking for a long time, which is awesome. There are a lot of things we can do as coaches, as parents, as teammates, and as adults of non-parents, right? We said that can really help raise the emotional intelligence of our young players, because I believe that better people will make better players. I wish we thought about that more, that we celebrate all forms of success, not just winning games, academic success, when a kid shows character, doing stuff when no one's looking, being a good teammate, lifting your friends up. You can say these are wishy-washy eye roller things, or you can lean into them and realize that those are the things that separate people when talent exists on an even playing field. And I wish we would do more of that. I think that's the joint mission we're on. And I want to throw it back to you two guys for any final words.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, if we could just, I would just turn the episode off. We stay on the phone for a couple hours, but I think it's just, I think it's just, it's one of those things where, at the end of the day, we all have to, the leadership in these roles. And I consider myself a leader in this space when I'm working with other coaches, and I want to be a leader. Like, I want to say, listen, I made a lot of mistakes. I've berated kids, and I've left locker rooms like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, why would I say that to him or her? Or why didn't I approach that parent differently? Or, wow, I really made that impact, but more than not, I run into people that I made a positive impact on. Right. But I think it comes down to the old, a very old adage, right? That you can affect a player in one sentence. You could affect a kid the rest of their life. So just be conscious of what you're saying. Are we all going to be perfect? No. Are we all going to make the greatest decisions as far as, critiquing a player or not motivating a player properly or having a conversation with a parent? I try to always step back and be like, the first time when a parent's yelling at me or upset with me, or a player is, not happy with the way I'm coaching them, that's the first time they're having that interaction. For me, it might be the 700th. Right. And so I'm like, but I can't treat it like I've talked to them 700 times. I've got to treat them like it's the first time I've ever heard it.
That's a good point.
And that's so hard to do. It's like, being at you almost have to be like a customer service person at Home Depot. Like, how many times do you get the same stupid question every, that they're like, this is dumb. Like, but it's the first time you're saying it, right? Yeah. So I think that's the way I try to look at parents. Like I say, okay, well, let me take this perspective from a person that has no idea that this probably has happened 4 million times before.
Take a deep breath and then do it.
But again, I think it's just how you approach it and not be condescending and not, not embarrass anyone. But again, it's very, very hard to do because very few of us are in the positions to make those decisions, right? You're kind of have these players in your hand and you're the one making these decisions. And parents, I guess feel like there's some type of entitlement there, like you're working for them. And I try to be like, well, I'm just trying to help you. And I don't think, and I will say this, 98% of us coaching want nothing but the best for the kids. Like nobody is going out of their way to hurt a child and ruin like their motivation for wanting to be in a sport. I just don't see it. I just, do I see crazy people? Yes, but I don't see, nobody's getting in saying, okay, this is the year I'm going to have 4 kids quit. Can't wait for that to happen. Like that doesn't happen. So it's just a matter of, how do we all communicate better? How do we all try to bring the temperature down? And how do we find ways to work together to motivate our kids so that we can see the signs of mental stress, so we can see the signs of a kid being depressed, so we can see the signs of somebody not thinking they're reaching their expectations of what the parent or the coach thinks they should be. And then we can intervene and have honest, open conversations about how and then to move forward. And it can't always be, well, because sometimes moving forward is, well, maybe you just shouldn't play the sport and you should move to something that makes you happy. Don't think it makes me happy. And I think that's where I see the most is when you see that, in Tom, you've seen it now, right? With the kids, like you see the kids with the dead eyes, like you see the kids that have no joy in being there. Like they're there and they're good. They perform well, but there's no joy. And, and sometimes I'd rather have a kid with a lot of joy with no talent than a kid with a hell of a lot of talent with zero joy. 100%. And to me, it's just like, and that's, again, it's all, I love these conversations because it opens it up to now, like have a lot of self-reflection and then start thinking about, okay, well, how am I going to approach a kid this week and make sure that I'm sending the right messages so that they don't feel like there's some kind of stress that like, if they don't do something for me, then, they're a failure in the eyes of their coach, their teammates, their parents, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just to wrap up here, as Lee has talked about, communication is so important. Both and you'd like to have healthy communication from coach to player to coach, player to player, kind of just have that whole ecosystem of communication. That might be a little idealistic, but from what you also said is, no coach is like getting into it to ruin a kid. Like they might ruin kids, but they're not getting into it to ruin kids. So it's a matter of a lack of, emotional intelligence or a lack of, or just their philosophy or their personal style. So maybe that's another way for players and parents to look at it and handle it and just say, it's an uncontrollable, first of all. Second of all, it's not your fault that that's how they are, right? I mean, they're just bad at communicating. Let's leave it at that. Like, at least then it makes it a little understandable. And then maybe a player and a parent can almost accept it instead of internalize it. Yeah. And instead of internalize it and go through that ambiguity phase and misunderstanding or not understanding, which is what leads to, I think, the anxiety or depression or those negative emotions. It's sad. It's really sad, but it's unfortunate. It's not sad. Yeah, Tom, it's unfortunate, but at least
it's all a teachable moment, though, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm saying that it's all teachable. If you have a bad coach or you have a tough year, as a parent, I want to utilize that experience, which sucks and is very painful.
It's hard.
I want to utilize that for after high school, after college. And again, look, these are hard conversations. No kid wants to have this. You're going to be in positions in the future where you might have a leader that's not good. So how are we going to deal with it now? Like, those are the questions that don't get asked enough. Too often right now, we're just finger pointing. Just like, well, yeah, he's a bad coach, and that's why you're not playing because the coach is bad. That is of no value to anyone, right? It's of no value. Right. You're just saving them from pain that they're going to experience later on anyway, right? So teach them. It's going to hurt either way. If you have a situation like that, how are we going to attack this together so that my kid can learn the skills needed to deal with this in the future, whether it's in collegiate, minor, or pro hockey, or just the workplace or college, whatever. Sorry. So I just wanted to say that, Tom. I did want to give you the last word though.
No, and I think we've talked a lot in a long time, as you said earlier, and it's a complex topic, right? And there's a lot of factors, but one of the things that I do think really was valuable here was your talking about identity, purpose, and community. I think that lays it out real quickly for parents that find themselves in a situation where they are feeling stress and anxiety, or their son or daughter is. Right. Look at those three elements, understand the communication thing. And maybe if you do have to go approach a coach, maybe it starts off with, hey, coach, I understand. I know you're not doing this on purpose, but and this could be the player, if he or she is strong enough and confident enough to do it, say, I know you're not doing it on purpose, but I'm going through a really bad time. And I just need you to know that, Yeah. And maybe that's good enough. I think it'd be good for the player to get it off their chest. And it could be just saying, that's all, I just wanted to let you know that. And I'm not asking for anything else, whatever, because otherwise, players go in there. How do I get on the power play? How do I get on the penalty kill? How do I get more ice time? How do I want to play with these other players because I think I'm good enough to play with them, whatever. Like that's probably a conversation that's not going to go as well, because the coach doesn't want to be told who to play and when to play them or how to play them, but if you are having a hard time as a player or as a parent, maybe it just gets a little bit of dialogue going and things can get better if you start off with saying, I know you're not doing it on purpose. And you know what? I think maybe my son or daughter is, or me as a player this is hard, but it's being realistic. I'm not as strong as the other guys, the other players. And I know you yell at them, but when you yell at me, and this is being vulnerable and it's asking a lot of a young player.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Or as a parent, you can just say, hey, I'm not calling to complain and anything. I just want you to know that my son or daughter's going through a hard time. I'm not asking for more playing time. I'm not asking for this. All I'm saying is that I really want this experience to be good. Can you just want you to be aware of that?
Yeah, the awareness part is huge. I mean, it's like, and it can't be like, hey, Mr. Chorske told my dad that I should be on the same line as so and so. Don't say that. But you could definitely say, like, listen, just want to let you know, Tommy just broke up with his girlfriend. He's been dating her for 3 years, probably going through a little tough time.
Right.
However that is, you don't know him because you don't live with him. You don't have breakfast with him. You don't have dinner with him. I do. And I'm his parent. Right. That's my job. My job is to not protect them, but to advocate for them. And, and then you take that what you want, but just understand that's the situation. Or little things like, for me, at the youngest kids levels, like, tell me if your son is deaf in their right ear. Like, I need to know that. Like, these are things like, don't let me assume like, oh, by the way, my son usually wears glasses, but for no time in that he's going to wear glasses, he won't do it in hockey. So if I'm screaming at a kid that he doesn't understand what I'm teaching, it's probably because he can't see. Right. But if I don't communicate that as a parent, I just think the kid's an idiot. I'm just like, well, the kid doesn't care.
Yeah, it's got to communicate.
Like, just communicate. And then I think, but at the older level, you can't be afraid. And again, if you're a coach that's going to take that the wrong way, I guess shame on you. But if you're a parent of a 18-year-old that can't say, not for nothing, just letting you know, I know he's not going to say this to you. And maybe the first part is you tell your son to go see it, right? But if the son doesn't say it and he's struggling, he's like, and you say, look, I just want to let you know, he's going through this or she's going through this. No big deal. Just want to give you a heads up. Have a great day. And then, there's no quid pro quo. There's no, like, you must do this to get this. There's no way, if you gave him more playing time, I think he'd feel better. You don't want to do that.
Right. Can't do that.
That's not it. I'm just letting you know that this is where he's not in a great place right now. Just be aware of it. I could guarantee you, if I know that, I might even be able to get in there and be like, oh my God, it really, like, what can we,
you got to create that environment.
What can we do?
You got to create the trust, and you got to create the communication bridge that everybody understands.
But that's why you're a part of sport, right? That's why you don't sit in your basement and do nothing. Like you're a part of sport because you want that community. Like the whole idea, the negative parts of community, have to be outweighed by the positive parts of being in the community. And being a part of the community is the fact that you do have support. You have people in locker rooms. That's what's so great about hockey, right? And we all say this all the time. Like you're in a constraint. You're like where Lee is right now, right? You're in a constrained area, shoulder to shoulder with somebody, getting dressed, and you're forced to communicate, hopefully. It's not like other sports where you get out of your car and you run on the field and you go play. It's the sport builds the community. It builds the opportunity for conversation. And then we just need to flourish that. We need to enhance
I'll say this. Sports is the opportunity to build identity, purpose, and community. And I think to round 100%. This out, that is
we've rounded this out like 7 times.
Well, but here's the thing, like therein lies the rub, right? Mike, you're passionate about this. We all are. It's there's the rub, right? Like that is what the true gift of sports is at any level. I think if you lose sight of that, which a lot of us have done or that can do, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. You can go in and out of that. That's when the negative things start to happen. That's when the mental breakdowns start to happen. So, Tom, I want to thank you again for donating so much time today. Another fantastic episode with you, buddy.
It's great talking with you guys. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I'm sure this will not be the last. And for those of you listening, if you're still listening, if you have a question for Tom or any of us, feel free to email us at team@ourkidsplayhockey.com. We'd love to have him back on. If you're wondering why you haven't heard from Christy for a while, she had to leave a little bit earlier. I don't think any of us anticipated going this long, but she's lovely and we love having her on. And Mike, I mean this. I'm not making fun of you in any way. You were very passionate about this. I love hearing you talk about it. This has been a great episode. So for Tom Chorske, Mike Benelli, Christy Cash, Anna Burns, I'm Lee Elias. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to tune in. We're here the whole holiday season. We're not stopping. We're going all the way through the new year and beyond, for that matter. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.